The dust-laden wind whipped across Beatrice Turner's face as she stood defiantly outside the Quartz Hill General Store, crumpled newspaper in hand and determination in her eyes, despite the chorus of laughter echoing from the porch. Arizona Territory, 1878, was no place for a woman seeking honest work beyond laundering or cooking. At least that's what the townsfolk kept telling her. "You're wasting your time, Miss Turner," called Morris Jennings, the storekeeper who'd just torn down her neatly written advertisement from his bulletin board. "No respectable establishment in Quartz Hill's gonna hire a woman for man's work. It ain't proper." Beatrice squared her shoulders, her brown curls escaping from beneath her boneless straw hat. At 24, she'd buried both parents, lost the family farm to drought and debt, and arrived in Quartz Hill with nothing but the clothes on her back and a fierce will to survive on her own terms. "With respect, Mr. Jennings, I fail to see how bookkeeping requires anything I don't possess," she replied, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning her cheeks. "I managed my father's accounts for 5 years before he passed. Did you now?" Drawled Walter Pierce, the saloon owner who was nursing his morning coffee on the porch. "And where's all that money now, I wonder?" His companions, 3 local merchants, erupted in fresh laughter. Beatrice clutched her worn leather satchel closer to her side, feeling the meager weight of her remaining coins. 2 weeks in Quartz Hill had proven fruitless. The boarding house where she'd taken a room would expect payment soon, and the prospect of seeking charity from the church ladies, who'd already offered her cooking positions, made her stomach twist. "A woman's place is in the home, Miss Turner," added Mrs. Holloway, the milliner, with a disapproving cluck of her tongue as she emerged from the store. "Or have you considered the Willow Creek Ranch? I hear they need a new cook since old Mrs. Perkins took ill." Beatrice forced a polite smile. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Holloway, but I'm seeking different employment." "Pride comes before a fall, young lady," the older woman warned, adjusting her bonnet against the morning sun. As the group dispersed, still chuckling at her expense, Beatrice turned away from the general store, blinking back tears of frustration. 6 more establishments had already turned her away that morning, each rejection more cutting than the last. She walked purposefully down the dusty Main Street, past the saloon where piano music had already begun despite the early hour, past the blacksmiths where the ring of hammer on anvil punctuated the morning air, until she reached the edge of town. There, posted on the telegraph office wall, she spotted a notice she hadn't seen before. "Ranch hand needed at Silver Creek. Inquire at Prescott Stables." It wasn't bookkeeping, but it was work if they'd consider her. With nothing to lose but her rapidly dwindling pride, Beatrice straightened her spine and headed toward the livery at the west end of town. The stables smelled of hay and horse, the familiar scents reminding her painfully of home. A young boy of about 12 was sweeping the entrance when she approached. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for information about the Silver Creek position." The boy looked up, surprised, then broke into a grin. "You mean the ranch hand job for Mr. Prescott's spread?" "Yes, that's the one." The boy leaned on his broom. "You ain't serious, are you, madam? That's man's work, hard riding cattle and such." Beatrice felt her patience fraying. "I was raised on a cattle ranch in Colorado. I can ride as well as any man, and I'm not afraid of hard work." "Well," the boy said, clearly amused, "Mr. Prescott ain't here, but his foreman is. Through there." He pointed toward the rear of the stables. She nodded her thanks and walked into the dimness of the stable, the sound of horses shifting in their stalls accompanying her footsteps. At the far end, a tall man in a worn leather vest was checking the girth on a chestnut mare. "Excuse me," Beatrice called. "I'm here about the ranch position." The man turned, and Beatrice found herself looking up into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath a shock of dark hair. He couldn't be more than 30, though the lines at the corners of his eyes suggested he'd spent most of those years in the sun. "Did someone send you to fetch a candidate?" he asked, confusion evident in his expression. "No, sir, I am the candidate." The man stared at her for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. "You want to work as a ranch hand at Silver Creek?" "I do, Mr. Prescott." Nathan Prescott. He wiped his hand on his trousers before extending it. "Owner of Silver Creek Ranch." Beatrice shook his hand firmly, noting the calluses that spoke of hard work. "Beatrice Turner, formerly of Turner Creek Farm in Colorado." Nathan Prescott studied her with undisguised curiosity. "Miss Turner, ranch work isn't, if you're about to tell me it isn't suitable for a woman. I've heard that speech 6 times today," she interrupted, then immediately regretted her sharpness. "Forgive me, Mr. Prescott. That was uncalled for." To her surprise, he chuckled. "I was going to say it isn't easy, for anyone. I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for work that pays fairly for honest effort." Beatrice met his gaze directly. "I can ride, Mr. Prescott. I can mend fences, tend livestock, and keep books. My father taught me ranching from the time I could walk." Nathan leaned against the stall door, crossing his arms. "And what brings you to Quartz Hill, Miss Turner, instead of running your father's place?" A shadow crossed her face. "Drought took our cattle. Bank took our land. Fever took my parents, in that order." Something in his expression shifted recognition, perhaps, or empathy. "I'm sorry for your losses. Thank you, but I didn't come here seeking pity, just employment." Nathan nodded slowly, his gaze assessing. "Can you start today?" Beatrice blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Pardon? I need someone who can work hard and isn't afraid to learn. I don't much care if they wear trousers or skirts, so long as the job gets done." He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "Though you might want to consider trousers for riding fence. You're offering me the position, just like that. Let's call it a trial. 1 week." He picked up his saddle and moved it to a nearby rack. "The town will talk, mind you, they always do." "Let them," Beatrice said, relief washing through her. "When do I start?" "Right now, if you're willing. I've got supplies to load, then we ride to Silver Creek. It's about 8 miles west." He paused. "Do you have anything you need to fetch from town?" "Just a small trunk at Mrs. Brewster's boarding house. We'll stop there on our way out." Nathan glanced at her dress. "And Miss Turner, I hope you packed something suitable for ranch work." For the first time in weeks, Beatrice felt a genuine smile spread across her face. "As a matter of fact, Mr. Prescott, I did." An hour later, Beatrice had changed into her brother's old clothes trousers, a loose cotton shirt, and sturdy boots which she'd altered to fit her slighter frame after his death 2 years prior. She'd paid her bill at the boarding house, ignoring Mrs. Brewster's scandalized expression when she learned of Beatrice's new employment, and met Nathan outside with her small trunk. "You ride well," Nathan observed as they made their way along the trail leading west from town, Beatrice astride a dappled mare he'd provided from his stable. "My father believed a person should be able to do anything needed on a ranch, regardless of whether they were born male or female," she replied, adjusting her hat against the afternoon sun. "My mother didn't always agree, but she came around eventually." Nathan nodded. "Sounds like a practical man." He was, right up until the end. Beatrice swallowed the lump forming in her throat. "Even when we lost the last of the herd, he kept saying, 'We'll rebuild, B. Just need one good season.'" "That's the rancher's eternal hope," Nathan agreed, his voice softening. "One good season." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the landscape unfolding around them, rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and juniper, giving way to open grasslands that stretched toward distant mountains. The April air was cool but promised the heat of summer to come. "There it is," Nathan said eventually, pointing toward a collection of buildings nestled in a valley where a creek wound through cottonwoods. "Silver Creek Ranch." Beatrice took in the sight. A sturdy two-story main house built of stone and timber, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals where cattle and horses grazed. It wasn't the largest ranch she'd seen, but it was well-maintained, speaking of careful management. "It's lovely," she said honestly. "Been in my family for 20 years. My father brought us here from Texas when I was 10. Pride colored his voice. "Started with 30 head of cattle and that cabin there." He pointed to a small structure near the creek. "Now we run nearly 500 head on 12,000 acres. As they approached, a stocky man with graying hair emerged from the barn, followed by two younger men who regarded Beatrice with unconcealed surprise. "Boss," the older man called, "didn't expect you back so soon. Found a hand for the south pasture." "I did," Nathan replied, dismounting and helping Beatrice down from her horse, though she hardly needed the assistance. "Jim Calloway, meet Beatrice Turner. She'll be taking the open position." Jim's bushy eyebrows shot up. "She's the new hand." "That's right." Nathan's tone brooked no argument. "Miss Turner grew up on a cattle ranch in Colorado. She knows her way around livestock." Jim looked dubious but nodded. "Your ranch, your call." He tipped his hat to Beatrice. "Madam, Mr. Calloway," she replied evenly. "I look forward to working with you." The younger men introduced as Luke and Daniel. Brothers who'd been working at Silver Creek for 2 years exchanged glances but offered polite nods. "Luke, help Miss Turner get her trunk to the cabin by the creek," Nathan instructed. "She'll be staying there." "By myself?" Beatrice asked, surprised. "It's got a good lock," Nathan assured her. "And it's close enough to the main house if you need anything, but gives you privacy." As Luke helped her with her trunk, Beatrice could hear Jim's lowered voice. "Nathan, the town's gonna have a field day with this." "A woman ranch hand living on your property?" "Let them talk," came Nathan's firm reply. "I need workers, not gossip." The cabin was simple but clean, a single room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, a small stove, and a wash basin. A window overlooked the creek, where cottonwoods cast dappled shadows on the water. "Mr. Prescott fixed it up last fall," Luke explained as they set her trunk down. "After his mother passed, he couldn't bear to leave her things in the main house, so he stored some of them here." Beatrice noted the feminine touches: curtains at the window, a colorful quilt on the bed, a small vase on the table. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. Luke shifted awkwardly. "Madam Miss Turner, the boys and I, we don't mean no disrespect, but ranch work is mighty hard." "I appreciate your concern," she replied, "but I've mended fences in blizzards and helped birth calves in thunderstorms. I suspect ranch work is hard for everyone, regardless of their gender." The young man nodded slowly. "Reckon so. Well, supper's at 6 in the cookhouse." "Mabel, she's our cook. She don't tolerate lateness." Left alone, Beatrice sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment of relief. She had work, a roof over her head, and a chance to prove herself. It was more than she dared hope for when the day began. By supper time, Beatrice had unpacked her few possessions, washed the dust of travel from her face, and made her way to the cookhouse, a spacious building attached to the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived. She hesitated at the door, steeling herself for the reactions her presence would inevitably cause. Inside, half a dozen men sat at a long table while a stout woman with iron-gray hair efficiently moved between a massive stove and the table, setting down platters of food. The conversation died as Beatrice entered. Well, the cook, presumably Mabel, said, hands on her ample hips. So you're the woman Nathan's hired to do a man's job. I'm Beatrice Turner, she replied calmly, refusing to be intimidated. And I've come to work same as everyone else. Mabel's stern expression didn't change, but she nodded toward an empty place at the table. Sit then. Can't work on an empty stomach. Beatrice took the offered seat, conscious of the curious stares from the other ranch hands. Nathan entered a moment later, and the tension eased somewhat as he took his place at the head of the table. Miss Turner, he said, I see you've met Mabel, our cook and the true ruler of Silver Creek. Don't you forget it, Mabel retorted, but there was affection in her gruff tone as she set a platter of roast beef on the table. Someone's got to keep you boys fed and in line. As the meal progressed, the initial awkwardness gradually dissolved. Nathan introduced each of the hands besides Jim, Luke, and Daniel. There were 3 others. An older man named Henry who managed the horses, a middle-aged Mexican called Miguel who spoke little English but nodded respectfully, and a young man barely out of his teens named Charlie. Miss Turner will be working the south pasture with Luke, Nathan explained between bites of Mabel's excellent roast beef. Fences need mending, and we've got strays to round up before the drive next month. Woman on a cattle drive, Jim muttered, though not quietly enough. I've been on 3, Beatrice stated matter-of-factly. From Colorado to Kansas City. Jim looked skeptical. Your pa make you cook for the outfit. My father put me on a horse, she replied evenly. I rode flank and drag same as any other hand, and yes, sometimes I helped cook. Everyone should know how to cook something besides beans. Charlie, the youngest hand, grinned. She's got you there, Jim. Your beans could choke a coyote. A reluctant chuckle went around the table, easing the tension further. Even Jim's weathered face cracked into a grudging smile. After supper, as the hands dispersed to the bunkhouse or their evening chores, Nathan walked Beatrice back toward her cabin. They'll come around, he said as they strolled along the creek bank, the setting sun painting the water gold and crimson. Most of them, anyway. I don't expect to be welcomed with open arms, Mr. Prescott. I just want a fair chance to prove I can do the job. Nathan, he corrected. If we're working together, Mr. Prescott seems overly formal. Beatrice nodded. Nathan then. And I'm Beatrice, though most people call me Bea. They paused at her cabin door, the twilight settling around them like a gentle blanket. For a moment, neither spoke, the only sounds the burbling of the creek and the distant lowing of cattle. Why did you hire me? She asked suddenly. The truth, please. Nathan considered her question, his blue eyes reflective in the fading light. Because when you spoke of your father's ranch, there was genuine knowledge there, and because he hesitated. Because 10 years ago my sister wanted to work our ranch alongside me. My father forbade it, said it wasn't proper. She married a merchant from Tucson instead, hates every minute of city life. He shook his head. I often wonder how different things might have been if my father had seen her skill instead of her gender. Beatrice was touched by his candor. Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down. I believe you. He tipped his hat. Dawn comes early, Beatrice. Best get some rest. She watched him walk toward the main house, a tall silhouette against the darkening sky, before entering her cabin and closing the door behind her. The first light of dawn found Beatrice already dressed and heading toward the stables. She'd woken before sunrise, determined to prove her worth from the very start. The ranch was quiet, the eastern sky just beginning to lighten with the promise of day. To her surprise, Nathan was already in the stable, saddling his horse. You're up early, he observed, though he didn't seem displeased. Always have been, she replied. Moving to the stall where the dappled mare, now hers to use, Nathan had explained waited. My father used to say the day's half wasted if you rise with the sun. Wise man. Nathan watched as she expertly checked the mare's hooves before reaching for a saddle. Her name's Pepper. She's steady but spirited when she needs to be. Like most females, Beatrice said with a small smile. Nathan chuckled. I wouldn't presume to make such comparisons. By the time they'd finished saddling their horses, the other hands were arriving, clearly surprised to find Beatrice already prepared for the day. Jim assigned tasks with the efficiency of a longtime foreman, sending pairs of men in different directions. Luke, you and Miss Turner take the south fence line. Check every post from the creek bend to the mesa. Mabel's packed you lunch. He handed Luke a sack. Should take most of the day to do it proper. Yes, sir, Luke replied, glancing uncertainly at Beatrice. Nathan mounted his horse. I'm riding to check the north pasture with Henry. Everyone meet back for supper. As they rode out, Beatrice could feel the eyes of the ranch hands on her back, evaluating, judging. She sat straighter in the saddle, determined to show them what she could do. The south pasture stretched for miles, bordered by a creek on one side and rocky hills on the other. The fence line they were to check ran along the western edge, marking the boundary of Silver Creek Ranch. Mr. Calloway doesn't think I'll last the week, Beatrice observed as they rode. Luke, a wiry young man with an open face, looked embarrassed. It's not personal, Miss Turner. Jim's been foreman here since Mr. Prescott's father ran the place. Set in his ways is all. And what do you think? He considered her question seriously. I think anyone willing to work deserves respect, but I also think this life is harder than most city folks realize. I'm not from the city, she reminded him, and I'm no stranger to hard work. They reached the fence line and began their inspection, dismounting frequently to check posts and repair loose wires. The spring sun grew hotter as the morning progressed, and Beatrice was grateful for her wide-brimmed hat and the canteen of water Luke had provided. By midday, they'd repaired a dozen weak spots in the fence and found evidence of cattle breaking through in several places. Rustlers? Beatrice asked, examining tracks that led through a damaged section. Maybe, Luke said, frowning as he knelt to study the signs. Or could be our own strays finding their way to better grass. This section's been giving us trouble all spring. They ate lunch in the shade of a lone cottonwood, the only respite from the sun in the open pasture. Mabel had packed them thick sandwiches, apples and cookies, along with a jar of cold tea. How long have you worked for Nathan? Beatrice asked, savoring the unexpected luxury of fresh bread and ham. Going on 3 years. Came out from Missouri with my brother after our folks died. Nathan gave us work when no one else would. He's a good boss fair, works alongside us most days. He seems to care deeply about the ranch. Luke nodded. It's his legacy. Especially after his ma passed last fall, she was the heart of Silver Creek. He hesitated. That's why some of the hands are wary of you being here. Folks in town already gossip plenty about Mr. Prescott not remarrying. Having a single woman living on his property will cause talk, Beatrice finished for him. People will always find reasons to gossip whether they're warranted or not. After lunch, they continued their inspection, working steadily through the afternoon. Beatrice's muscles ached from the unaccustomed labor after weeks of relative inactivity in town, but she welcomed the pain. It was honest fatigue, earned through useful work. They were nearly back to the ranch when they spotted a steer caught in a thicket near the creek, bellowing in distress. Its leg appeared to be tangled in roots and undergrowth, and it thrashed wildly as they approached. That's one of our yearlings, Luke said, dismounting. Must have broken through where we haven't fixed yet. Beatrice slid from her saddle. We need to calm him before we can free him. Luke looked doubtful. He's pretty worked up, Miss Turner. Maybe I should, but Beatrice was already moving forward, speaking in low, soothing tones. The steer's eyes rolled wildly, but she approached from the side, staying in its field of vision, her movements deliberate and calm. "Easy now," she murmured. "We're going to help you." To Luke's evident surprise, the animal gradually ceased its thrashing, though it continued to breathe heavily. Beatrice moved closer, gently placing a hand on its flank. "I'll need your knife," she said to Luke. "The roots are wrapped around his fetlock." Luke handed over his pocket knife and watched as Beatrice carefully cut away the tangled roots, all while maintaining a steady stream of calm reassurance to the frightened animal. When the last root was severed, the steer scrambled to its feet, gave them a wild-eyed look, and bolted off toward the main herd. "You've got away with cattle," Luke said admiringly as they remounted. "Most men would have hog-tied him first thing." "Sometimes patience works better than force," Beatrice replied, though she couldn't hide her pleasure at the compliment. The sun was setting by the time they returned to the ranch, the western sky ablaze with color. Nathan and Henry were unsaddling their horses when Beatrice and Luke rode into the yard. "How's the south fence?" Nathan asked, coming to help Beatrice dismount. "Needed work in several places," she reported, "but we fixed what we could." "There's evidence of cattle breaking through near the creek bend. Our yearling got caught in the thicket there," Luke added. "Miss Turner freed him. Never seen anyone gentle a scared steer so quick." Nathan's eyes met Beatrice's, approval evident in his gaze. "Good work, both of you. Get cleaned up for supper." As she walked toward her cabin, Beatrice felt a small surge of triumph. One day down and she'd proven herself capable. It was a start. The next morning brought a new test. A spring storm had swept through overnight, and dawn revealed a creek swollen with rainwater and several corrals partially flooded. "All hands on deck," Jim announced at breakfast. "We need to move the yearlings to higher ground and reinforce the creek bank before we lose more pasture." The work was hard and muddy. Everyone soaked to the skin within an hour despite rain slickers. Beatrice worked alongside Luke and Daniel, helping to drive the nervous young cattle to safer ground, then joining the effort to pile sandbags along the creek's edge where it threatened to overflow. No one questioned her presence or capability now. There was simply work to be done, and every pair of hands was needed. She passed sandbags with the men, her muscles burning with the effort, hair plastered to her face by the relentless rain. "You holding up?" Nathan asked during a brief moment when they found themselves working side by side. Beatrice nodded, too breathless for words, and accepted the canteen he offered. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, a moment of warmth amid the cold rain. By mid-afternoon, the creek had been contained, the livestock secured, and the immediate danger past. Everyone trudged back to the ranch buildings, exhausted and mud-covered but satisfied with the day's work. "Miss Turner," Jim called as they dispersed toward their respective quarters to change. "Good work today." It was grudging praise, but praise nonetheless. Beatrice nodded her thanks. Too tired for more in her cabin, she peeled off her sodden clothes and washed away the mud as best she could with the cold water in her basin. Her hands were raw and blistered from the rough sandbags, her back ached, and she was certain she'd never been so exhausted in her life. Yet as she changed into dry clothes, Beatrice felt a deep satisfaction. She belonged here not because anyone had given her permission, but because she had earned her place through honest labor. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Nathan, similarly freshly changed, holding a small jar. "Liniment," he explained, "for your hands." "I saw the blisters forming." "Thank you," she said, accepting the jar. Their fingers brushed again, and this time the contact lingered a moment longer than necessary. Nathan cleared his throat. "Mabel's making stew for supper. Says we all earned it today." I'll be along shortly." He nodded and turned to go, then paused. "Beatrice, you did well today. Some of my men who have been ranching their whole lives couldn't have worked harder." Pride warmed her chest at his words. "Thank you, Nathan." As days turned into weeks, Beatrice settled into the rhythm of ranch life. The initial skepticism of the hands gave way to respect, as she consistently proved her capabilities mending fences, tending to injured livestock, riding countless miles to check the far-flung corners of Silver Creek's sprawling acreage. May brought the first hint of summer heat, long days of preparations for the upcoming cattle drive to the railhead in Prescott. Nathan had decided to trust her with responsibilities usually reserved for more experienced hands, including helping to train 2 new ranch hands who arrived mid-month. "Miss Turner will show you the ropes," he told the bewildered young men who looked from Nathan to Beatrice with undisguised surprise. "A woman," one of them muttered when Nathan walked away. "Yes," Beatrice replied calmly. "A woman who knows more about this ranch than you do, Mr. Ellis." "Now, shall we begin with how to properly saddle a horse, or do you already possess that skill?" The young man flushed, appropriately chastened, and Beatrice felt a small thrill of satisfaction. She had earned her place here not through special treatment, but through demonstrating her worth day after day. Each evening, after supper was cleared away, she often found herself walking with Nathan along the creek, discussing the day's work or plans for the ranch. These quiet moments had become a cherished ritual, a time when the barriers of employer and employee seemed to soften into something more personal. "My father would be proud," she said one evening as they paused on the small wooden bridge that spanned the creek. "Seeing me working a cattle ranch again." "He raised a remarkable daughter," Nathan replied, his voice gentle in the gathering dusk. "I've never met anyone with your determination, Beatrice." She turned to face him, struck by the warmth in his gaze. "Thank you for giving me a chance when no one else would." "I'd like to think I recognize talent," he said with a self-deprecating smile, "but truthfully, I just needed help with the south pasture." "The fact that you've become indispensable to Silver Creek in a month's time says more about you than my judgment." "Indispensable," she echoed, surprised by the description. Nathan's expression grew serious. "More than you know." There was something in his tone that made Beatrice's heart quicken, some unspoken meaning behind his words that hung in the air between them. For a moment, she thought he might say more, might bridge the invisible distance that propriety maintained between ranch owner and ranch hand. Instead, he straightened and gestured toward the main house. "It's getting late. We've got an early start tomorrow." Beatrice nodded, trying to ignore the flicker of disappointment. "Good night, Nathan." "Good night, Beatrice." As she walked back to her cabin alone, Beatrice admitted to herself what she'd been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Nathan Prescott. It was foolish, impractical, and almost certainly unrequited. He was her employer, a respected rancher with deep roots in the community. She was his hired hand, a woman out of place in a man's world. Yet the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day, with each shared conversation and quiet moment of understanding between them. Beatrice resolved to guard her heart more carefully. The last thing she needed was to jeopardize the security and respect she'd fought so hard to establish. The cattle drive to Prescott began at dawn on the first Monday in June, with nearly 400 head of cattle and 10 riders, including Beatrice. The town had buzzed with gossip when word spread that Nathan Prescott was taking a woman on his drive, but he'd ignored the talk with the same quiet confidence he showed in all his decisions. "Miss Turner's earned her place," was all he said when Jim questioned the wisdom of including her. The first day on the trail was grueling hot. dusty work keeping the herd together as they moved northward through the rolling grasslands. Beatrice rode flank position, turning back strays and maintaining the herd's cohesion alongside Luke. "You ride like you were born to it," he commented as they paused atop a rise, watching the cattle flow like a living river through the valley below. "In some ways, I was," she replied. "My earliest memory is sitting in front of my father on his horse, his arm around me as we checked the herd." By nightfall, they'd made good progress, stopping to make camp near a small spring where the cattle could water. Charlie, who doubled as the drive's cook when they were on the trail, prepared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and biscuits while the others settled the herd for the night. Beatrice took the first watch with Henry, riding the perimeter of the resting herd beneath a sky brilliant with stars. The old horseman was a man of few words, but his silent acceptance of her presence spoke volumes. "Mr. Prescott's changed since you came," he said unexpectedly as they completed their circuit. Beatrice glanced at him, surprised by the observation. "How so?" Henry considered his answer carefully, as was his way. "Smiles more, seems less. Alone." He looked at her directly. "Man needs more than land and cattle to make a life, Miss Turner." Before she could formulate a response to this cryptic statement, Henry tipped his hat and rode off to wake the next watch, leaving Beatrice to ponder his words as she sought her bedroll for a few hours' rest. The drive continued for 4 days, each more challenging than the last as the terrain grew rougher approaching Prescott. On the third day, a sudden thunderstorm scattered the herd, and it took hours of hard riding and drenching rain to gather the frightened cattle. "You're bleeding," Nathan said with concern when they finally regrouped. The herd contained once more. Beatrice touched her cheek, surprised to find a scratch there. "Must have caught a branch while chasing strays through the brush. It's nothing." Nathan dismounted and approached her horse, reaching up to examine the cut. His touch was gentle as he wiped away the mingled blood and rain with his handkerchief. "Doesn't look deep," he said, his face close to hers, "but we should clean it properly when we make camp." Beatrice was acutely aware of his proximity, of the ranch hands watching this interaction with varying degrees of interest. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. That evening, true to his word, Nathan brought warm water and a clean cloth to where Beatrice sat by the fire. The rest of the men were occupied with the herd or their own tasks, affording them a rare moment of privacy. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the scratch on her cheek. Beatrice nodded, closing her eyes as he carefully cleaned the wound. His touch was tender, almost reverent, and she found herself holding her breath. "You've surprised everyone, you know," he said quietly. "Even Jim's singing your praises now." She opened her eyes to find him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Including you?" she asked softly. "Especially me." Nathan's hand lingered on her cheek, no longer tending to the cut but simply resting there, warm and steady. "Beatrice, aye, boss." Charlie's urgent call broke the moment. "We've got trouble with the herd." Nathan stepped back immediately, the spell broken. "We'll talk later," he promised before hurrying off to address the new crisis. But later remained elusive as the drive continued, each day bringing new challenges that demanded their full attention. By the time they reached Prescott on the afternoon of the 5th day, Beatrice was too exhausted to dwell on unfinished conversations or the meaning behind gentle touches. The cattle were delivered to the railroad stockyards, the paperwork completed, and payment received a successful drive by any measure. Nathan gave the men the evening to celebrate in town before they would begin the ride back to Silver Creek in the morning. "I'd be honored if you joined me for supper," he said to Beatrice as the others dispersed toward the saloons and bathhouses of Prescott, somewhere more civilized than a campfire. She hesitated, aware of how it might appear the ranch owner dining alone with his female hand in town. But the prospect of a proper meal and Nathan's company outweighed her concerns about gossip. "I'd like that," she replied, "though I'm hardly dressed for civilized dining." She gestured ruefully at her trail-worn clothing. "There's a dress shop near the hotel," Nathan suggested. "Consider a new dress part of your wages for the drive." An hour later, bathed and dressed in a simple but elegant blue calico, dress her first new garment since arriving in Arizona, Beatrice met Nathan in the hotel dining room. He'd also cleaned up, his dark hair still damp from washing, wearing a clean shirt and vest that transformed him from trail boss to the prosperous rancher he was. "You look beautiful," he said with such genuine admiration that Beatrice felt color rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. It feels strange to be in a dress again after weeks in trousers." They were seated at a corner table, somewhat removed from the other diners, though Beatrice was aware of curious glances cast their way. Prescott was a larger town than Quartz Hill, but word traveled fast in ranching communities, and Nathan Prescott was known in these parts. Over a meal far more elaborate than trail fare roast chicken, fresh vegetables, and apple pie for dessert, they talked easily about the drive, the ranch, and their plans for summer. It felt different than their evening walks by the creek, more deliberate, somehow as if both recognized they had crossed some invisible boundary. "I've been meaning to ask," Nathan said as they lingered over coffee. "What are your plans, Beatrice? Beyond the summer, I mean." The question caught her off guard. "I haven't thought that far ahead. When I arrived in Quartz Hill, I was just hoping to find work that would see me through the next week. And now," she considered her answer carefully, "now I've found work I enjoy with people I respect at a place that almost feels like—" She hesitated. "Like home," Nathan supplied, his blue eyes intent on her face. "Yes," she admitted. "Though I know it isn't, not really. It could be," he said quietly, "if you wanted it to be." Beatrice's heart quickened at his words, at the implication behind them. "Nathan, what are you saying?" He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I'm saying that what began as a working arrangement has become something more to me, much more." "We've known each other barely 2 months," she said, though she didn't withdraw her hand. "Long enough for me to know that Silver Creek was just a place before you arrived." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Now it feels like it could be a home again, our home." Beatrice felt dizzy with the sudden turn of the conversation, with the realization that her carefully guarded feelings might actually be returned. "The town will talk," she said, echoing his words from their first meeting. "Let them," he replied with a smile. "They always do." Later, as they walked back to the hotel where separate rooms awaited them, Nathan stopped beneath the awning of a closed shop, turning to face her in the quiet street. "I should have said this more clearly," he began, his expression earnest in the glow of the street lamp. "I'm falling in love with you, Beatrice Turner. I think I began falling that first day in the stables when you stood your ground and demanded a chance to prove yourself." Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. "Nathan, you don't need to answer now," he said quickly. "I know this is sudden, and I know your independence means everything to you. I'm not asking you to give that up. I'm asking if there might be room in your life for both the work you love and me." She looked up at him, this man who had seen her value when others saw only her gender, who had given her the chance to rebuild her life on her own terms. In the short time she'd known him, he'd become not just her employer but her champion, her friend. And now, perhaps, something more. "There's room," she said softly. "There has been for some time now." Nathan's face broke into a smile of such genuine joy that Beatrice couldn't help but return it. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, He leaned down and kissed her a gentle, questioning kiss that deepened as she responded, her hands coming to rest on his shoulders. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. "We should get back to the hotel before we scandalize all of Prescott," Beatrice laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I suspect it's too late for that." The journey back to Silver Creek took 3 days of stolen glances, brushing hands as they rode side by side, and quiet conversations around the campfire after the others had retired to their bedrolls. Nothing had been formally announced to the ranch hands, but Beatrice suspected they weren't blind to the change between their boss and herself. Jim confirmed this suspicion on the second evening, approaching her as she checked her horse's shoes before turning in. "Miss Turner," he said, his gruff voice unusually hesitant, "I owe you an apology." Beatrice straightened, surprised. "Whatever for, Mr. Calloway, for doubting you could do the job." He shifted uncomfortably. "And for what I'm about to say, which ain't really my business." She waited, curious. "I've known Nathan since he was a boy, watched him grow into a fine man who puts the ranch above everything." Jim cleared his throat. "Lost his mother last year and his father 5 years before that. Ranch has been his whole life since then." "I'm aware of his dedication to Silver Creek," Beatrice said carefully. "What I'm trying to say is—" Jim removed his hat, turning it in his weathered hands. "He deserves happiness. And if you're the one to bring that to him, then you have my respect not just as a capable hand, but as the woman who's put light back in his eyes." Touched by the foreman's awkward but sincere words, Beatrice nodded. "Thank you, Jim. That means a great deal." He replaced his hat with a sharp nod and walked away, leaving Beatrice to reflect on how much had changed in such a short time. 2 months ago, she'd stood outside the Quartz Hill General Store, the object of ridicule for seeking honest work. Now she was not only respected for her abilities, but had found something she'd never expected: love amid the sagebrush and cattle of Silver Creek Ranch. They arrived back at the ranch on a golden afternoon in mid-June, the familiar buildings a welcome sight after days on the trail. Mabel hurried out to greet them, fussing over their dusty, trail-worn appearance and promising a proper supper to celebrate their successful drive. "And you," she said, pointing a wooden spoon at Beatrice, "need a proper bath. I've had water heating since I spotted you coming down the North Ridge." Gratefully, Beatrice retreated to her cabin, where she found a large copper tub had been placed near the stove, steaming water already poured. It was a luxury she hadn't expected, and she silently blessed Mabel's thoughtfulness as she sank into the warm water, washing away the dust and fatigue of the trail. Clean, dressed in the blue calico from Prescott, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of braided for practicality, Beatrice made her way to the cookhouse. The transformation from ranch hand to woman drew appreciative glances from the men, though none were disrespectful. Nathan was waiting outside, similarly transformed by clean clothes and freshly trimmed hair. He offered her his arm with a smile. "May I escort you to dinner, Miss Turner?" "You may, Mr. Prescott," she replied, enjoying this small formality after days of trail dust and hard riding. Dinner was a boisterous affair, the hands reliving moments from the drive, exchanging good-natured barbs and devouring Mabel's roast beef and apple cobbler as if they hadn't eaten in weeks. Through it all, Beatrice was aware of Nathan beside her, his occasional glances, the way his hand found hers beneath the table. After the meal, as the hands drifted toward the bunkhouse and Mabel shooed them from her kitchen so she could clean up, Nathan drew Beatrice aside. "Walk with me," he asked, though it wasn't really a question. They strolled along their usual path by the creek, the evening air sweet with the scent of cottonwood and wild sage. Fireflies had begun to appear, tiny lanterns floating in the gathering dusk. "I've been thinking," Nathan said as they reached the small bridge, "about what you said in Prescott about Silver Creek feeling like home." Beatrice nodded, remembering the conversation that had changed everything between them. "I want to make it official," he continued. "Your home, I mean. Not just as my employee, but as my wife." Though she'd suspected this was coming after their declarations in town, the actual proposal still took Beatrice's breath away. "Nathan." He took both her hands in his. "I know it's fast. I know we're still learning each other. But I also know that I love you, Beatrice Turner. I love your strength, your determination, your kindness, and yes, your stubbornness too." She laughed softly at that last part. "I've been called worse things." "I don't want to change who you are," he said earnestly. "I fell in love with a woman who can mend fences and gentle, frightened steers better than most of my hands. I'm asking you to partner with me in ranching and in life." Beatrice looked up at this man who had seen her value when others saw only limitations, who offered not just his heart but respect for her abilities and independence. In the short time she'd known him, Nathan Prescott had proven himself to be everything she'd never dared hope to find. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile, and he lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace that made her laugh with surprised delight. When he set her down, his kiss was both tender and promising, sealing their commitment under the vast Arizona sky. "There's something else," he said when they finally parted, "something I've been wanting to tell you." "What is it?" she asked, noting the sudden seriousness in his expression. "That first day when you asked why I hired you." He took a breath. "I told you part of the truth about my sister. But there was more to it." Beatrice waited, curious. "When I saw you standing there in the stable, asking for work that everyone else had denied you, I recognized something in you, a determination I'd seen before, in myself when my father died and everyone said I was too young to run Silver Creek." His eyes held hers. "I knew then that you were special, that you'd earn far more than the coins I could pay you." "What do you mean?" "You've earned the respect of every hand on this ranch. You've earned a home here. And you've earned my heart, Beatrice. That's worth more than all the silver dollars from our cattle drive." Touched beyond words, Beatrice reached up to touch his face. "And you, Nathan Prescott, have given me back something I thought I'd lost forever, a place to belong, work that matters, and someone to share it with." They were married on a bright Saturday morning in July, in the small white church in Quartz Hill. The same townspeople who had ridiculed Beatrice for seeking men's work now filled the pews, curiosity and the social importance of Nathan Prescott overcoming their earlier disdain. Mabel had outdone herself creating Beatrice's wedding dress, transforming white muslin ordered from a catalog into something elegant and simple that suited the bride perfectly. Luke stood as Nathan's best man, while the young schoolteacher from town, one of the few who had shown Beatrice kindness during her job search, served as her maid of honor. Jim Calloway surprised everyone by appearing in a proper suit, his weathered face solemn as he asked for the privilege of walking Beatrice down the aisle in place of her father. "Seems fitting," he'd said gruffly when he made the offer, "since I've come to respect you almost as much as I did your husband-to-be's father." As vows were exchanged beneath the simple wooden cross, Beatrice thought of how far she had come since that desperate day outside the general store. From homeless and nearly penniless to becoming the wife of the most respected rancher in the county, not through compromise or submission, but through proving her worth on her own terms. The celebration afterward, held at Silver Creek Ranch under a canopy of cottonwood trees, brought together ranch hands, townspeople, and neighboring ranchers in a rare display of community harmony. There was music from a local fiddler, dancing on a wooden platform built for the occasion, and enough food to feed half the county. "Mrs. Prescott," Nathan murmured as they took their first dance together. "How does it feel?" Beatrice smiled up at him, radiant in her happiness. "Strange and wonderful at the same time, though I hope you don't expect me to start wearing dresses while mending fences." He laughed, the sound warming her heart. "I'd never dream of it, though I must admit you look beautiful in white." "Don't get used to it," she teased. "Practical trousers tomorrow." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he assured her, spinning her gracefully across the dance floor. Later, as the celebration continued around them, they slipped away for a moment of quiet on their favorite bridge over the creek. The setting sun painted the water gold, a perfect mirror to the wedding band now adorning Beatrice's finger. "I have something for you," Nathan said, reaching into his pocket. "A wedding gift." He handed her a folded document, which Beatrice opened carefully. It was a deed to Silver Creek Ranch, with both their names written as equal owners. "Nathan," she breathed, understanding the significance of what he'd done. In an era when married women rarely held property in their own names, this was more than a gesture, it was a declaration of true partnership. "Silver Creek is yours now as much as it is mine," he said simply. "As it should be." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. "Thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me when no one else would." "Thank you for proving me right," he replied, drawing her close, "and for making Silver Creek a home again." As twilight deepened around them, they stood wrapped in each other's arms, the sound of celebration drifting from the ranch house, the future stretching before them like the vast Arizona sky, boundless with possibility. 3 years later, on another golden summer evening, Beatrice stood on the porch of the main house, watching Nathan approach on horseback, their 2-year-old son Thomas perched securely in front of him. The boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard as his father urged the horse into a gentle trot for the final stretch. Silver Creek Ranch had prospered under their joint management, expanding its holdings, improving its breeding stock, and earning a reputation throughout the territory for both the quality of its cattle and the fairness of its business practices. The original hands remained, joined by new workers drawn by word of a ranch where skill mattered more than background or gender. "Mama," Thomas called excitedly as they reached the house. "Papa let me ride the big horse." "So I see," Beatrice replied, smiling as Nathan dismounted and lifted their son down. The boy was the perfect blend of them, both Nathan's blue eyes and Beatrice's determined chin, already showing signs of the independence that characterized his parents. "He's a natural," Nathan said proudly, ruffling the boy's dark curls. "Sits a horse better than some of our hands." "Takes after his mother, no doubt," called Jim from the corral, where he was instructing 2 new ranch hands. The foreman had softened considerably over the years, particularly since becoming an honorary grandfather to young Thomas. Beatrice laughed and scooped up her son. "Bath time for little cowboys, especially ones who smell of horse." "No bath." Thomas protested, though his resistance was merely token as Beatrice carried him into the house. Later, after their son was tucked into bed with a story about brave cowboys and smart cowgirls, Beatrice and Nathan sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge above Silver Creek. It had become their evening ritual, this quiet time to discuss the day, plan for tomorrow, and simply enjoy each other's company. "I received a letter from my sister today," Nathan said, his arm comfortable around Beatrice's shoulders. "She and her husband are finally moving back from Tucson. Seems he's decided city life doesn't suit him after all." "Will they settle nearby?" Beatrice asked, knowing how much Nathan had missed his only sibling. They've purchased the old Henderson place just beyond our north pasture." He smiled. "Emma's already talking about helping with the cattle operation. Seems watching you run Silver Creek has inspired her to reclaim her own ranching dreams." Beatrice felt a warm glow of satisfaction. In the years since her arrival in Quartz Hill, she'd not only found her own place, but had perhaps helped change perceptions about what women could accomplish in this rugged territory. "I have news too," she said, taking Nathan's hand and placing it gently on her stomach. "Come winter, Thomas will have a little brother or sister to boss around." Nathan's face lit with joy as he gathered her close. "Beatrice Prescott, you continue to amaze me, even after 3 years of marriage, especially after 3 years." He kissed her tenderly. "When I hired you that day, I told you that you'd earn more than coin. But I never imagined how much you would give me in return." As they sat together in the gathering darkness, the Silver Creek murmuring its endless song below the house, Beatrice thought about the journey that had brought her here from desperate job seeker to respected rancher, wife, and mother. The path had not been easy, but every step had led to this place of belonging and purpose. "I was thinking," Nathan said after a comfortable silence, "about expanding the operation, taking on more hands, maybe even offering apprenticeships to young women who want to learn ranching." Beatrice looked at him with surprise and pleasure. "Really? Why not? Silver Creek could become known for more than just good cattle. We could be the place that gives others the chance I gave you the chance to prove their worth based on ability, not expectations." "I love the idea," she said sincerely, "and I love you for thinking of it." Nathan's smile was tender in the moonlight. "It's what you taught me, Beatrice, that sometimes the most valuable workers are the ones everyone else overlooks." Inside the house, their son slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that he was loved. Below the porch, Silver Creek continued its journey through the land that bore its name. And between them, nurtured by respect and deepened by love, grew the future they were building together, a legacy of partnership that, like the ranch itself, would endure long after them. "You know," Beatrice said softly, "that day in the stables when you said I would earn more than coin. I never imagined just how right you would be." Nathan drew her closer, his lips brushing her temple. "Neither did I, Mrs. Prescott, neither did I." As night settled fully over Silver Creek Ranch, they remained on the porch, planning their future beneath the vast Arizona sky, a woman who had defied convention to find her place, a man who had recognized her worth, and the love that had transformed them both.